might free you to act on even a simple measure. For the sake of these children, these 9-year-olds, these 10-year-olds, these 11-year-olds, these beautiful children, please, damn it, please, think if it was your child or grandchild. Now, Madam President, it wasn't always this way in Congress. Nearly 30 years ago, I was proud to be the author of the Brady Bill and a leader of the assault weapons bans. These were major legislative accomplishments, and they worked because they were good, common-sense laws. And they passed because both sides of the aisle worked together. And because they became law, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands perhaps, lives were saved. Children, elderly people, people of color, you name it. People now walking the streets who might have been dead had we not passed these laws. But today, the NRA has made it all but impossible for even the bare minimum to move forward in Congress. And the other side is all too ready to bow in obeisance to the NRA in service of their whims. Madam President, these types of shootings used to be rare. So rare, in fact, that each occurrence stood apart as a singular event. But now these shootings happen so frequently that the nation can barely keep up, barely mourn the 10 people shot in the grocery store in Buffalo before being rocked to our collective core by the slaughter of 19 elementary school children in the predominantly Latino community of Uvalde, Texas. These shootings happen everywhere: movie theaters, churches, synagogues, concerts, nightclubs, grocery stores, college campuses, high schools, elementary schools, with beautiful children getting ready to move out into the prime of life. Honestly, I thought Sandy Hook 10 years ago would be the breaking point. I thought that that would be the tragedy that forced Republicans to examine their conscience and think, oh God, we can't allow school children to be slaughtered. Well, I was wrong. The slaughter of 20 elementary school children in Sandy Hook didn't move them. We heard about their thoughts and their prayers, but no action. Then came Aurora and the Navy Yard. Then after Charleston, I thought, maybe this is the moment. 9 Americans shot in a church during Bible study? This has to move the Republicans here in the Senate. Nope. It didn't. They gave a few more thoughts, a few more prayers, no real effort to solve the problem. And so, Madam President, it continued on and on and on. San Bernardino, Orlando, Las Vegas, Sutherland Springs, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, Thousand Oaks, the Pittsburgh Synagogue, Santa Fe, Texas, the El Paso Walmart, Dayton, Virginia Beach, Boulder, Buffalo, and now Uvalde. When will it end? We must act to have it end. Not thoughts and prayers, action. After the shootings in El Paso and Dayton 3 years ago, the Republican leader promised that red flag laws and background checks would be front and center in a Senate debate. He was then majority leader, but then the Republicans did nothing. They ensured there was no debate, just as they wanted. They don't want to debate this issue. Indeed, all we hear from Republicans are thoughts, prayers, and now there's a new phrase. Now some of my Republican colleagues want to lift up the community. That sounds heartening, but it does absolutely nothing to prevent the next family from having to grieve for their loss. And it won't do a single damn thing to prevent another life from being taken. It won't do a single damn thing to prevent another child from being shot at school, a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, an 11-year-old, beautiful children. And Madam President, you may have noticed that when they aren't offering thoughts and prayers to distract from their inaction, many of my Republican colleagues focus on the motives of the shooters instead of focusing on the obvious common denominator. They talk about the real villain being mental illness and say nothing of the fact that we are a nation suffocated by firearms. Rates of mental illness are more or less the same across the developed world. The U.S. is not an outlier on mental illness, but we are an outlier in the sheer number of guns available in this country. That is why we have so many shootings and other Western countries don't. If mental illness were the simple cause, you'd see mass shootings happening all over the developed world, but you don't. What you do see here in America are enough guns to give every man, woman, and child in this nation a firearm and still have nearly 70 million guns left over. What you do see is that it's far too easy for people to access weapons in this country and then to use them to slaughter people, to slaughter children by the dozens, by the dozens. Again, America doesn't stand out when it comes to the rate of mental illness, but we are unique among the world's developed nations in that today, the leading cause of death among children is no longer a car accident, is no longer illness or malnourishment. The leading cause of death among children is a firearm. The leading cause of death of children, do you hear that, my Republican colleagues, is a firearm. Clearly, many of these shooters had different motives, but at the end of the day, does the motive really matter to the family with an empty seat at their dinner table? Children who lost parents don't just care whether the shooter was mentally ill. They care that the shooter had ready access to a gun. Spouses who lost their partners don't just care that the shooter had a grudge or an agenda or a grievance. They care that the shooter had ready access to a gun. Americans who lost friends and coworkers and parishioners, who lost fellow worshipers, don't just care whether the shooter wrote a manifesto. They care that the shooter had ready access to a gun. They care that their loved ones had been taken from them by someone who had access to a gun. Taken from them while some members of this body refuse to do what it takes to prevent those losses, refuse to focus on the denominator to every single one of these shootings, refuse to even do the bare minimum as they bow in obeisance to the wretched NRA. So what do we do about it? If the slaughter of school children can't convince Republicans to buck the NRA, what can we do? There are some who want this body to quickly vote on sensible gun safety legislation. Legislation supported by the vast majority of Americans, Democrats, Republicans, and independents alike. They want to see this body vote quickly so the American people can know which side each senator is on, which side each senator is on. I'm sympathetic to that, and I believe that accountability votes are important. But sadly, this isn't a case of the American people not knowing where their senators stand. They know. They know because my Republican colleagues are perfectly clear on this issue, crystal clear. Republicans don't pretend that they support sensible gun safety legislation. They don't pretend to be moved by the fact that 90% of Americans, regardless of party, support something as common sense as background checks, that the vast majority of gun owners support the background checks bill. They don't pretend that they want to keep guns out of the hands of those who might use weapons to shoot concert-goers or movie watchers or worshipers or shoppers or children. They don't pretend at all. Just listen to them when they show up in obeisance to the NRA at the NRA's convention in Houston, the same state as Uvalde, on Friday. They'll offer their thoughts and prayers. They'll say they want to lift up the community, and then they'll go back to their smoke-filled rooms and assure the NRA and gun manufacturers that nothing will change, that they've got the NRA's back. No, Mr. President, Madam President, no, this isn't a case of Republicans hiding their position. They proudly tell the American people which side they are on, and America is much worse off for it. And if nothing does change, we're condemned to find ourselves right here once again very, very soon. As I was reading the reports of the tragedy in Texas, I saw that Amanda Gorman, the young woman who mesmerized the nation at President Biden's inauguration, tweeted, "The truth is, one nation under guns. One nation under guns." That is simply heartbreaking. Heartbreaking to think that this is the legacy that older generations are leaving behind for young Americans. One nation under guns. It doesn't have to be that way. Our parents don't need to drop their kids off at school and wonder if their kid will be next. That's in the thoughts of millions of moms and dads right now. Our citizens don't have to endure the fear of getting groceries while constantly keeping an eye behind their backs. Again, millions of Americans are worried about that right now. Americans can make a choice. Americans can reject the Republican guns-at-all-costs doctrine, obeisance to the NRA, not even voting for the most simple, sensitive, positive, and popular gun legislation. Americans can cast their vote in November for senators or members of Congress that reflect how he or she stands with guns, with this issue, at the top of the voters' lists. In the meantime, my Republican colleagues can work with us now. I know this is a slim prospect, very slim, all too slim. We've been burnt so many times before. But this is so important, and I have such a firm belief, taught to me by my late father who passed away in November, that if you do the right thing and persist, justice will eventually prevail. But you got to keep persisting, and we will. And for that reason alone, we must pursue action and even ask Republicans again to join us. Maybe, unlikely, burnt in the past, that their hearts might see what has happened and join us and do the right thing. They know it's the right thing. They can work with us to craft legislation that would prevent needless loss of life. It's their choice. As Majority Leader, I haven't been shy about putting bipartisan legislation on the floor for a vote. But bipartisanship means both parties must engage in crafting a bill, like happened in the House and Senate 30 years ago with the Brady Law and the assault weapons ban. Democrats have been trying to work hard with Republicans, Senator Murphy, Senator Manchin, on legislation that will eventually pass and become law. The other side has refused. There are so many options available to us, so many ideas. We just need some brave Republicans to stand athwart history and yell, "Stop!" To think, if it was your child, your grandchild, how would you feel? And would that move you to do something about this plague of guns? Like my colleague, Senator Murphy, I refuse to believe that we cannot find a path forward. Make no mistake about it. If we can't find a good, strong bill that has bipartisan support, we will continue to pursue this issue on our own. We have no choice. It's too important. Lives are at stake. And I accept the fact that most of my Republicans are not willing to do what it takes to prevent this needless loss of life. The NRA will have a hold on them. That's just a reality, unfortunately. But it is unacceptable to the American people to think that there are not 10 of my Republican colleagues, just 10, 1 out of 5 over here, who would be ready to work to pass something that would reduce this plague of gun violence. It's unacceptable that there are not 10 members of the Republican caucus willing to save lives, find a way to do it. And yet, that's where we are. That's where we are. Another week, another American community devastated by mass shootings, all of us thinking of these 9 and 10 and 11-year-old children just shot, gone. Another American community, Uvalde, which will never recover like the other communities before it. Will it yet be, Uvalde, another example of Republicans unwilling to do what it takes to keep Americans safe? I yield the floor.
Majority Leader.
I understand that there are 5 bills at the desk due for a second reading on block.
The clerk will read the titles of the bills for the second time.
H.R. 3807, an act to amend the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 to increase appropriations to the Restaurant Revitalization Fund and for other purposes. H.R. 3967, an act to improve health care and benefits for veterans exposed to toxic substances and for other purposes. H.R. 6833, an act to amend Title 27 of the Public Health Service Act, the Internal Revenue Code of 1986, and the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974 to establish requirements with respect to cost sharing for certain insulin products and for other purposes. H.R. 8, an act to require a background check for every firearm sale. H.R. 1446, an act to amend Chapter 44 of Title 18 United States Code to strengthen the background check procedures to be followed before a federal firearms license may transfer a firearm to a person who is not such a license.
In order to place these bills on the calendar under the provisions of Rule 14, I would object to further proceeding on block.
Objections having been heard, the bills will be placed on the calendar.
Madam
President.
The Minority Leader.
Our country is sickened and outraged by the senseless evil that struck Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, only yesterday. According to early reports from authorities, it appears that a deranged young man tried to murder his own grandmother, then crashed his car and then ran into an elementary school and began killing. At least 19 young children and 2 teachers were murdered for no apparent reason at all. These innocent kids were simply going to school. They'd put on their backpacks, said goodbye to their parents, and headed off for another day of learning and friendship. There were only 2 days left before summer break. And because of this maniac, at least 19 of these kids never made it home. One of the victims was a 10-year-old girl whose father described her as full of life, a jokester, always smiling. A 10-year-old boy who loves sports and art had just received his honor roll certificate a few hours earlier. His mother says he was thrilled about moving up into middle school next year. It's literally sickening to consider the innocent young lives that were stolen by this pointless, senseless brutality. To consider the parents and families who sat waiting at the Civic Center, waiting to either be reunited with their son or their daughter, or to learn they never would be. The investigation is still underway. The authorities will continue to learn exactly what happened and how. In the meantime, we're also praying for the Border Patrol officer who, according to reports, was wounded after he responded to the scene, and for all the law enforcement, paramedics, and first responders whose dedication yesterday saved lives. Most of all, the entire nation's hearts are broken for the victims and for their families. Words simply fail. Yesterday, the Uvalde school superintendent said, quote, "We're a small community. We will need your prayers to get us through this." We pray fervently that in the midst of this nightmare of grief, our Heavenly Father will make manifest to those families His promise in Psalm 34, that the Lord is near to the brokenhearted.
Morning business is closed. Under the previous order, the Senate will proceed to executive session and resume consideration of the following nomination, which the clerk will report.
Nomination, Federal Housing Finance Agency, Sandra L. Thompson of Maryland to be director.
I suggest that's a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.
Madam President, I ask that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Madam President, I just had heard the minority leader say he was sickened by what happened in Uvalde. Tomorrow, we have a bill coming to the floor that addressed the last shooting, the one in Buffalo. Will he join us in allowing a debate and amendments to that bill that will address the gun plague in America? Thoughts and prayers are not enough. We need action. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Michigan.
Madam President, I had originally, before yesterday, planned to speak today at length about the fact that in 36 days, children across the country are going to lose healthy meals they've been getting in the summer, as well as meals during the school year. And schools are going to be put in a very difficult situation. Up to 1/3 of the schools may not be able to offer school meals at all. So that was my intent in coming to the floor, but after what happened, the horrible situation in Texas, 19 more children, a teacher, a grandma, dying. Now I wonder if it's how many more kids will be killed in the next 36 days. We don't have to live like this. We don't have to live like this where we're begging for 8 more Republicans to join us, 52 of us, who want to make sure kids get healthy meals. We don't have to live like that. And we don't have to live in a situation where parents are afraid, where people are afraid to go to their place of worship, where they're afraid to go to the grocery store, where they're afraid to just live because of some random shooting by somebody who got a hold of a gun, a military assault weapon, or didn't have to go through a background check and went to a gun show, or whatever it is that is causing the carnage in our country related to guns and mass shooting. It's not happening in other countries. It's not happening in other countries. And they have as many challenges as we do. But in other countries, that may be somebody going into school with a knife. And the kids get hurt, but they live. Here, it's assault weapons. It's shooting children indiscriminately in an elementary school. We don't have to live like this. We don't have to live like this. The question is, how many Republicans would join us to save children's lives from gun violence? How many? Can we just get started? You know, Leader Schumer's put 2 bills on the calendar related to background checks. Bipartisan Background Checks Act, closing the gun show loophole, requiring background checks for gun purchases made through private, unlicensed leaders, and the Enhanced Background Check Act, which would provide a national background check system, enough time to thoroughly review gun sales. Now, these are not controversial. Neither is feeding children, by the way. These are not controversial. 90% of the public says, duh, of course. Of course. Now, the folks that don't want us to do it are the folks that make the guns. They're making a lot of money. They're trying to pit us against each other. They put out all kinds of crazy theories. They're funding our Republican colleagues to stop anything from happening, because God forbid if the profits of the gun manufacturers would go down, because maybe there were a few less guns that were on the street. This is not rocket science. We know what to do. I grew up in a northern Michigan community surrounded by legal gun ownership, my own family, my friends, my relatives. You know, when the assault weapon ban went in, Madam President, for 10 years, nobody in my family stopped hunting. Nobody in my family, you know, had to say, oh, well, we can't do what we want to do because military assault weapons aren't available. That was put in by Democrats. It was then repealed by Republicans. And we saw violent shootings that had gone down tremendously suddenly go up. So there's a lot of different things that we could do. And the question is, will we come together on any of them? Will we start with comprehensive background checks? That is the question. Will we have Republicans joining us? Every action we take or inaction relates to our values, and it relates to our will to do it. We can do anything if we want to do it. I mean, last week we came together on this floor to address baby formula for the WIC program, and we did it together. It was great. One of the fastest things I've ever seen move through here, and I appreciate that. I appreciate Senator Bozeman joining me in this. But why can't we then extend that, first of all, to making sure in the summer kids get healthy food that they're going to start losing in 36 days, and that during the school year, we're supporting our schools to provide healthy meals for all of our children in a time of supply chain breakdowns, costs going up. And what happens when we start hearing in the fall from those schools that have to stop all school meals? Because somehow we couldn't come together and prioritize feeding children. And on top of that, I mean, I hate to say feeding children is, all of this is important, but their lives, we can't even come together around basic common sense measures that will begin to address what is happening with the random shootings and the killings of our babies, of our children. We can do better than this. We have to do better than this. We have to do better than this. We only need 10 Republicans. We need 8 Republicans to help us feed healthy kids in the summer and on into the, give kids healthy meals this summer and on in the fall. 8. We only need 10. Only need 10 Republicans to join us on background checks, closing the gun show loophole. We don't need everybody. We don't need everybody. Some folks can go run and stand with the gun manufacturers and what has become an incredibly extreme NRA, dangerous positions. Folks can do that. We just need 10. 10 people to stand up and go, this is too much. This has gone too far. We can do better than this. Because if not now, what is the number? I'd like to ask Leader McConnell, what is the number? How many children will he describe and sympathy will he show for dead children on the floor of the U.S. Senate before it's enough? How many? 100 more? 200 more? 1,000 more? When is it enough? When too many children have been killed? When is it enough? It's past enough right now. We can do better than this for our kids, and I hope this is the moment that Republicans in the United States Senate will step up and join us. Thank you, Madam President. Madam President,
Senator from Michigan.
as if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of the following bills en bloc. Calendar 185, H.R. 767, calendar number 186, H.R. 1170, calendar 187, H.R. 1444, calendar 189, S2932, calendar 325, S3825, calendar 326, S3826, calendar 328, H.R. 735, Calendar 329, H.R. 1298, Calendar 330, H.R. 2324, Calendar 332, H.R. 3529, Calendar 333, H.R. 3613, and Calendar 334, H.R. 41668. And I would have an amendment. Let me repeat, Calendar 332, H.R. 3579.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed to the measures en bloc.
I ask unanimous consent that the bills en bloc be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table, all in en bloc.
Without objection.
Thank you. Madam President, I would suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.